The 13th session of the Senate in the third regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Antonio F. Trillanes IV will lead the chamber in prayer.
In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, Amen. Heavenly Father, we offer you our utmost gratitude for all the blessings that you have bestowed upon us. We humbly seek your benevolence for all our shortcomings and weaknesses of heart. We praise you, Lord, for we know that through your divine guidance we accomplish anything. May you continue to strengthen our nation and inspire us with your love so that we may have the will to endure all challenges that come our way. In Jesus' name we pray, Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Amen.
Thank you, Senator Trillanes. The Senate choir will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, after which they will render a song entitled Kayumangging Malaya. Thank you very much to our Senate choir for that national anthem and kay Mangging Malaya. The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Scudero, Estrada, Gingona, Unasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Trilon.
16 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The majority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 12th Session, 19th of August 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the reading of the journal of the previous session, session number 12, is dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading House Bill number 4660 under Committee Report number 86. This is the bill on judicial leave privileges, Mr. President.
Before the chair acts on the motion of the majority leader, the chair would like to greet our colleague, Senator Vicente Soto III. A very happy birthday, for the record. Happy birthday. All right. On the previous question, there is a motion that we consider on third reading House Bill 4660 under Committee Report 86. Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
The Senate Secretary will do so.
House number 4660. An act providing for 30 days forfeitable leave privileges annually to all judges of the first level courts.
Mr. President, copies of this measure, as approved on second reading, were distributed to the members of the Senate last August 19, 2015, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution, and thus we are ready to approve the measure on third reading. And so, Mr. President, we ask for a roll call vote.
The Secretary will conduct a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Scudero, Estrada, Gingona.
Senator Enrile is recognized.
Mr. President, I have to register an abstention.
Let the record reflect an abstention for the minority leader.
Honorable Senators Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Hunasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Trilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative vote, no abstention. House Bill 14 affirmative votes, no negative vote, 1 abstention. House Bill 4660 is hereby approved on third reading.
Mr. President, we now move to another bill on third reading. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider on third reading Senate Bill number 2898 under Committee Report number 202. This is the bill on national athletes, coaches, and trainers' benefits and incentives, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure on third reading is in order.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, may we request the Secretary to read only the title of the bill without prejudice to inserting into the Senate Journal and Record the whole text thereof.
Secretary is directed to do so.
Senate number 2898. An act expanding the coverage of incentives granted to national athletes, coaches, and trainers, repealing for the purpose Republic Act number 9064, also known as National Athletes, Coaches, and Trainers Benefits and Incentives Act of 2001, and appropriating funds therefore.
Mr. President, copies of this measure, as approved on second reading, were already distributed to the members of the Senate last August 20, 2015, thereby complying with the 3-day rule found under Section 26, Paragraph 2, Article 6 of the 1987 Constitution. And so, Mr. President, I ask for a roll call vote.
Secretary will conduct the roll call vote.
Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano PIS, Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile.
Senator Enrile is recognized.
I also abstain from voting, Mr. President.
Let the abstention of Senator Enrile be recorded.
Senators Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Hunasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar. Senate President Trilon.
14 affirmative votes, no negative vote, 1 abstention. House Bill 2898 under Committee Report number 202 is approved on third reading.
Mr. President, before we move on to the reference of business, we would like to acknowledge Senator Juan Ponce Enrile's family. Ms. Katrina Ponce Enrile and Ms. Christine Ponce Enrile are here with us.
The presence of our visitors are made of record. This
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will read the reference of business.
Bill on first reading. Senate number 2910, entitled An Act Promulgating a National Mental Health Policy Towards the Enhancement of Integrated Mental Health Services, the Promotion and Protection of Persons Utilizing Mental Health Services, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes by Senator Cayetano P.
Health and Demography, Finance.
Resolutions PSR number 1512, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation in the report that sugar smuggling is prevalent in the Manila International Container Port. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Ways and Means.
PSR number 1513, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation in the report that more than 1.1 million public school students have no access to electricity, according to the Department of Education. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Energy.
PSR number 1514, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that the Philippine Coast Guard intercepted smuggled rice in Palawan. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Trade, Commerce, Entrepreneurship, Public Services.
PSR number 1515, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that the Commission Elections has failed to secure a financial bidder for the upgrade of precinct count optical scan machines. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Electoral Reforms, People's Participation.
PSR number 1516, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recent Commission on Audit report that by the end of 2014, Transco failed to use its subsidy of 1.5 billion pesos for the repair and rehabilitation of transmission lines destroyed by Super Typhoon Yolanda. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Energy.
PSR number 1517, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the recent Commission Audit report that properties of the Sultan Kudarat State University were not insured with the government service insurance system as of March 2014. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Finance.
PSR number 1518, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation in the report that unemployment and low wages continue to force Filipinos to work overseas. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Economic Affairs, Labor, Employment, Human Resource Development.
PSR number 1519, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation. The report that 47 legislators spent 141 million pesos in disbursement acceleration program funds for milk feeding. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Finance.
PSR number 1520, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry of legislation on the report that some 100 workers at the City of Dreams, Manila, will be suspended amid profit losses. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Labor, Employment, Human Resource Development.
PSR number 1521, resolution directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that there is a looming food shortage in an island in the disputed West Philippine Sea. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Social Justice, Welfare, Rural Development, Local Government.
PSR number 1522, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the United Nations report that militarization continues to displace indigenous peoples in Mindanao. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Cultural Communities, National Defense and Security.
PSR number 1523, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the Department of Labor Employment report that many employers are not complying with the Kasambahay law. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Labor, Employment, Human Resource Development.
PSR number 1524, resolution honoring and commending the outstanding Philippine soldiers, TOPS, of 2015 awarded by the Metrobank Foundation, Inc. and the Rotary Club of Makati Metro by Senator Trillanes Lefort.
Rules.
Additional reference of business resolutions, PSR number 1525, resolution honoring and commending the awardees of the 2015 search for the country's outstanding police officers in service, COPS, conducted by Metrobank Foundation Incorporated, Central Lagarda.
Rules.
PSR number 1526, resolution honoring and commending the awardees of the 2015 search for outstanding teachers, SOT, conducted by Metrobank Foundation Incorporated, Central Ligarda.
Rules.
PSR number 1527, commending Ligaya Fernando Milbangsa as a cultural advocate of Pangalay, a traditional dance from Mindanao, for her instrumental role as documenter, performer, scholar, and advocate of this unique cultural treasure, Central Ligarda.
Rules.
PSR number 1528, directing the Senate Committee on Public Services and appropriate committees in the Senate to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the seaworthiness of our marine vessels to minimize environmental threats posed by sea mishaps in light of the recent accident of passenger ferry MV Wonderful Stars, which caught fire minutes after it docked in Ormoc City Pier, Central Lapid.
Public Services.
PSR number 1529, directing the Senate Committee on Environment and Natural Resources and other appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the implementation of Republic Act No. 147, otherwise known as the Wildlife Resources Conservation and Protection Act, in light of the recent death of the Philippine eagle Pamana, which was shot inside a protected area 2 months after it was released into the wild by Central Lapid.
Environment and Natural Resources.
PSR number 1530, directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the blatant disregard of most motorists to yield the right of way to pedestrians crossing designated crossways, zebra lanes, or pedestrian lanes pursuant to the country's commitment to the Decade of Action for Road Safety 2011 to 2020 by Central Lapid.
Public Services, Public Works.
PSR number 1531, resolution congratulating and commending the all-male chorale in Sambol, Aleron, for emerging as the overall champion in the 31st Takarasuka International Chamber Chorus Contest, TICC, at the Vega Hall in Takarasuka City, Japan on 25 July 2015, Central Lapid.
Rules.
PSR number 1532, directing the Committee on Economic Affairs and other appropriate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation and effective strategies and solutions to address the adverse economic impact of the worsening traffic conditions in Metro Manila by Senator Paolo Benigno Bamaquino IV.
Economic Affairs, Public Works.
PSR number 1533, directing the proper Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the Bureau of Customs' new policy of opening balikbayan boxes sent by overseas Filipinos to their families, Senator Maria Lourdes Nances Binay.
Ways and Means.
PSR number 1534, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that the Bureau of Customs plans to intrusively inspect and further tax balikbayan boxes, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Ways and Means.
PSR number 1535, resolution directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that Philippine eagle Pamana was killed in a protected area in Davao Oriental months after being released into the wild by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Environment and Natural Resources.
Committee reports. Committee report number 204, submitted by the Committee on Public Works on House number 1140, introduced by Representatives Biron and Cosalan, entitled an act naming the national road from Barangay Abangay to Barangay Poblacion, Municipality of Dingle, Province of Iloilo, as Board Member Rufino A. Palabrica Jr., National Road, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor, Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 205, submitted by the Committee on Public Works on House number 1247, introduced by Representative Ramos et al., entitled an act naming the diversion road in Sorsogon City, Sorsogon, as Salvador H. Escudero, the third diversion road, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor, Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 206, submitted by the Committee on Public Works on House number 4215, introduced by Representatives Romualdo and Cosalan, entitled an act naming the Camiguin Circumferential Road in the province of Camiguin into the Pedro P. Romualdo Circumferential Highway, recommending its approval without amendment. Sponsor, Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 207, submitted by Committee on Public Works on House number 4013, introduced by Representative Cosalan et al., entitled an act renaming the Akop, Tublay, Kapangan, Kibungan, Bakon, Sinipsip, Bugyas Secondary National Road in the province of Benguet to Governor Bado Dangwa National Road, recommending its approval without amendment, Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 208 submitted by the Committee on Public Works on House number 4012, introduced by Representative Dalog et al., entitled An Act Renaming the Gurel, Bocod, Kabayan, Nabatan Road in the province of Benguet to Congressman Andres Acop, Cusalan Road, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 209 submitted by Committee on Public Works on House number 5204, introduced by Representative Singson, entitled An Act Naming as St. Paul Avenue, the road beside the St. Paul College, Ilocos Sur, SPCIS High School Department, located in the municipality of Bantay, province of Ilocos Sur, and the SPCIS College Department, located in Barangay Bayubay, municipality of San Vicente, province of Ilocos Sur, recommending its approval with amendment, Senator Marcos Jr.
Calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I ask for a 1-minute suspension?
Suspension for 1 minute.
Role of AFP during elections. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2894 under Committee Report number 200. This is the bill on the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, Mr. President.
Any objection here? Now consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status is that the sponsor already delivered his sponsorship speech last August 12, and thus we move that we open the period of interpellations.
In order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Marcos,
Senator Marcos is recognized.
and that we also recognize Senator Pia Cayetano to interpolate on the measure.
Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the indulgence of the sponsor, I would like to ask, most of my questions are clarificatory. I am actually still in the period of reviewing, but to get the ball rolling, I will start asking my questions, as I said, with the indulgence of the sponsor.
Certainly, Mr. President, we would be happy to receive the interpolation of the good lady from Taguig.
Mr. President, just to give His Honor a heads up on the areas, I mean, this is a 100-page committee report. I don't think we can cover everything in one day, so I have divided my areas of inquiry to the following. One would be funding. The second would be exclusive and concurrent powers, highlighting certain areas of interest that I have, specifically health, education, environment, culture. And then With respect to funding, I will ask about the block grants, taxations. I also have questions on the Bangsamoro Parliament composition. I think that's all we'll have time for today. If we still have more time, then I may go into the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. So with that, I will start with the annual block grant. Section
Yeah, I'm just marking.
127 on revenue sources has an enumeration. I will read it into the record. The source of revenue of the Bangsamoro regional government shall include, among others, the following. Letter C, annual block grants coming from the national government. And then there is section 137 that states that for the budget year immediately following the year this act takes effect, the amount of the block grant shall be equivalent to 4% of the net national internal revenue collection of the Bureau of Internal Revenue, less the internal revenue allotment of local government units. Can I ask His Honor for the to give us an idea of what this figure is like, based on figures we have, I guess, from ARMM the past years?
Yes, the figures as have been calculated, 4%, depending on the different years, range from around 32 to 36 billion, depending on which year we are referring to. So it is approximately 34, 35 billion, 4% of the national interest revenue collection. To be very specific, the saan yung 4%? Saan yung 4%? Okay, in the based on the base year 2012, the BIR total net national revenue collection was 584 billion 790,643,103 and 99 centavos, 4% of which comes to 23,391,625,724. But this is the base year 2012. So we will probably, that is why I estimated it. If the year, if as it says in the law, the calculation is made on the year previous, we can anticipate that if it is 2013 or 14 or 15, it will be higher than that.
Okay. I will get back to His Honor on this now that I have that figure. But in the meantime, does His Honor know how the if let's assume for the sake of discussion, 23 billion, how will this be allocated? I mean, maybe by way of percentage. Is there, because there's nothing in the law as far as my review has gone that tells us how this will be allocated. If we look at, are they bound by the Constitution that requires that the biggest budget will go to education? What are the guiding factors or the guidelines, Mr. President?
Well, the fundamental principle that we had, what we assume will be followed, is that, of course, they will be bound by the Constitution and all relevant laws. However, in these, to speak specifically on the allocations of the block grants, the block grants are going to be appropriated by the Bangsamoro Parliament. Now, there is no guidance being provided, at least in the original draft, as to where those monies are to be appropriated. And if there are any specific percentages. And that is why that is why I left it open, Mr. President, particularly because this has been such a contentious issue. I was hoping to get the inputs from the other senators. And if I might go further, it seems to be a rather short-sighted system if the national government is merely to cut a check every year in the equivalent of 4% of the internal revenue collections and hand it to the Bangsamoro government without any kind of guidance, any kind of requirements in terms of the method in which it is appropriated and the areas and sectors in which it is appropriated. I go back to the system that we have in local governments, where after the PS, the personal services requirements, the local governments are required as a mandated appropriation to appropriate 20% of their ERA to what is called the Social Development Fund. And within the Social Development Fund, there are identified sectors such as health, education, peace and order, all different. This is to ensure that the sectors or the areas that are considered critical services will in fact be funded by the local government unit. I would suggest, in fact, I am starting to put together a kind of a formula that follows in that same vein to make it more clear how the appropriation must go, and to make certain that the appropriations go, at least some appropriations go to these critical sectors that we have identified as necessary in the provision of services by government to its people.
Thank you. My concern, and I'm happy to hear from the sponsor that they're working on some kind of guideline, is that if you look at Section 21 on exclusive or devolved powers, Section 21, item number 10, is budgeting. So this concerns me because if budgeting is an exclusive power, then precisely the input of the national government, by way even of lessons learned, mistakes made, may not necessarily hold any weight within the Bangsamoro government. So I don't know if that's, I mean, maybe we can also consider stronger language on this, because His Honor has been a head of an LGU. I have not, but I know enough to know that it is not an easy job. Budgeting is not easy. And I would like the wisdom of the national government to be something that would seriously be considered. And when I see, every time I see something in the exclusive powers, that concerns me. I know it doesn't prevent consultation, but given the big sums of money, given that these are funds that would normally be allocated throughout the country, but it is now being specified to a specific area, I do feel strongly that there should be more national government involvement in the planning.
I fully agree with that. It is the exclusive powers that we have kept in this basic law, the exclusive powers that are provided for in the Constitution, and furthermore in the last amendment to the Armed Law in RA 9054. And so that is where that language comes from. But again, there is actually a deeper concern on this particular subject. And we constantly hear from the powers that be that the reason that we are writing this basic law on Bangsamoro, on the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, is because ARM has been a failed experiment. No matter what we feel about that, I think we would all agree that the reason it can be called a failed experiment is that the large amounts of funding that were provided by national government to the arm were not felt at the lowest, at the grassroots level. In other words, there was no provision of services. There were very few advantages that were gained by the armed provinces, by the budget that was given by the national government. Now, if we are to improve on the experience of ARM, then that is a primordial concern, and that is why we have to put in a more stringent and rigorous mechanism by which we know, we can be assured that the funding that national government provides to the Bangsamoro region and to the Bangsamoro government is subject to that kind of test where we can see that the funds actually will be used for development, will be used for services, will be used for investment, public investment in the region. So certainly any suggestions that the good lady would like to make in that regard, it would certainly be most welcome.
Well, for starters, I appreciate the explanation of His Honor in that we seem aligned in our concern that we just want to ensure that the funding really trickles down and is felt by the most needy. I would start during the period of amendment by moving budgeting to a concurrent or joint powers. That is probably going to be my one simple amendment for now.
Certainly, that is something that we will take note of, and we can discuss further in the period of amendments. I will be making further committee amendments, and this subject will be covered in those. And perhaps we could exchange notes with the lady senator and see what what consensus we can come to in that. It is certainly something we need to do. It is not sufficient for us to put in under exclusive powers budgeting and then to have, as I said, a transfer payment of 4% of the national internal revenue income without any kind of guidance. If you will notice, Mr. President, in other parts of the bill, in other parts of the basic law, as a substitute bill, as I have written it, there are other safeguards that we have tried to put in beyond the simple definition of exclusive powers, beyond the simple definition of the size of the block grant. And those are to try to, first of all, that the appropriations that are made by the Bangsamoro Parliament will, first of all, fall under the auditing process of the COA, and therefore they will be held to generally accepted practices of accounting, of good financial management. Furthermore, the DBM will also have a review function, and this is again in an attempt to make it akin or to make it a kind of a parallel to what happens to the local governments, because we have to continue to remember that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is in fact a local government. So the rules that apply to other local governments must apply also to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, and so that function of review that the DBM carries out should also be applied to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. As anyone who has any experience in local government will know, that many times a local sanggunian will make an appropriation for a certain item, and this will be disapproved by the DBM because it is seen as not being helpful or advantageous to the constituency. And so we are hoping to continue to apply that process not only to the other local governments but also to the Bangsamoro region. So that will be there are added safeguards that hopefully define the manner in which that very large amount of money is going to be appropriated and budgeted.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. again, I'd like to emphasize the importance of coordination and learning from national government's experience. I read somewhere that we can expect certain countries in Africa to have the most modern transportation system, water and electrification programs, precisely because they have been left behind in terms of development, that now that there is funding and the opportunity to provide these very basic services, they've learned from the experience of the developed countries. And so it would be a pity, Mr. President, that we make this funding available and not learn from our own experiences. For example, traffic and MRT. There are key cities in the Mindanao area, Visayas and Mindanao for that matter, that I dread to go to as well. They say, buti pa sa probinsya, hindi rin eh. It's just as bad. Well, I don't know if it's just as bad, but I sit in traffic as well. And so I'd want to see that those now planning, whether it's transportation, urban development, urban planning, that they take into consideration and they genuinely are knowledgeable about the mistakes we've made. That's such a big thing, Mr. President. It's not meant to be insulting in any way. It's not meant to be, saying nothing about their competence, but just to ensure that the lessons we learned are used in these areas where they can really catapult the areas to development.
Well, that is perfectly understandable, Mr. President. Of course, we do not want the Bangsamoro government to try to reinvent the wheel regarding certain elements that, as the lady says, the lady senator says, that we have learned those lessons, and hopefully, having learned them, will not repeat them again. Yes, that certainly is a concern, and that because once again, if this is a concern that was raised by the other LGUs when in our discussions with them on this basic law, and as can be seen, the funding, much of the funding that is being received by the Bangsamoro region will come from the national government from sources outside of the Bangsamoro region. In other words, from the collections of other LGUs. And that's why LGUs, although the local executives, although they recognize that there needs to be an accelerated development plan for Muslim Mindanao, for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, they would just like that if they are going to sacrifice funding which they will no longer be able to avail of, that is being given to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, that at the very least that there are assurances that that funding that is being given will be used in a constructive and efficient and advantageous way, so that, as we say, there is not that wastage, and we do not go through the experience of ARM, where clearly the funds that national government was providing, which was not audited by the national government, which could not really, which was not under the control of the national government, we know very well that much of those monies did not go to development programs, did not go into the provision of services, and went in certain cases just to buy luxury items, to build big houses, and into some other people's pockets. And the worst case of all is in the purchase of arms. And so a system by which we can provide that assurance to local executives is certainly necessary, and it's something that we will have to put in place if we are going to be able to guarantee to our people that, in fact, what we are doing here is for the betterment of Muslim Mindanao, and which will help us down the road of peace.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to point out something consistent with the matter we are discussing. When you look at the sources of funding, one of the two sources I'm I'm looking at the list. I don't have it in front of me, but there. Again, I go back to sources of funding, Section 27, grants and donations, and then loans and overseas development assistance. And then I also relate that to the exclusive powers on urban and rural development, development plan, housing and human settlement, etc. A very practical concern I have. I know for a fact that our ASEAN neighbors, some countries more than others, are just waiting to do deals or have probably already entered in some deals with perhaps the leadership or the official leadership. They're waiting to finalize some deals with the official leadership on development, which is great. No, I'm all for development. I'm all for investment in that region. But the question will be, which was the better deal? You know, just in all the key cities in the country now, do we want a BRT? Do we want a subway system, an MRT? Are we going to invest in the ferries? We're an island nation. And it's not easy to make this kind of judgment. No? At the end of the day, it will be judgment calls, I'm sure. But it can be very tempting to accept it will be very tempting to accept offers from these countries who I'm assuming are going to be very generous because these are deals that they will be bagging. And that's again why, not to say that the national government has been squeaky clean in their dealings. I mean, we also read and we also know of problems, but there just has to be more transparency and more, and again, to make use of lessons we've learned. I mean, that is really a big concern that I have. I'd really like to wipe the slate clean, the best technology, the best transportation system to come into this area because of the long decades and centuries of being left behind. Pero yun nga, without the support, without the lessons learned in the, let's just say in Metro Manila, sayang yung opportunity niyan. I don't want to make a mess of it. I just want to be sure that we're on board to assist in all possible ways.
Mr. President, those are my sentiments exactly. To take it even further, it is not only countries within the region, but countries around the world who have made their declarations of support and pledges already that when this government is formed and that when it begins to operate, that they would be very willing and in fact are looking forward to coming to the Bangsamoro region and making some major investments in not only in services but also even in things like education, things like heavy industry, things like tourism, and so that really holds great potential. And much as we would, because of our great desire to make a success of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, to make a success of this new government that we are forming, of course we would like to be able to apply our best minds, our best experience, our best skills to the development program of the region. However, the whole idea behind this, and this is the very fine line that we must tread when we are in writing this basic law, that very fine line between this enthusiasm we may have to help and to teach the lessons that we have learned, and autonomy. And the basic premise, of course, is that the reason we are doing this is to give autonomy to the autonomous region. And that is why we have to leave those rather important decisions to the local government. And in the interest of devolution, in the interest of autonomy, then we, I suppose, like a parent to a child, we are slowly allowing them to make those decisions for themselves. Where that line is drawn is obviously dependent upon us, legislators. But again, that line is the balance between the control of the national government and perhaps maybe let me amend that, not control, but the suggestions and the best lessons and the best practices of to be given by national government to that autonomous region, and for the government of that autonomous region to make their own decisions as to which are the better directions to go, where are public investments meant to will best serve the constituency. So again, it's perfectly understandable that we would like to make sure that this is all perfect, that we have we recognize that this is in many ways a blank sheet of paper, and we could do very, very well if we take into account all of the lessons learned. Now, I think in that regard, especially on the detailed appropriations, detailed budgeting, detailed policy, what we can do is make very strong suggestions, make our case. But again, because we have provided the region its autonomy, those decisions will still have to be made. Now, again, as I said, there is a balance, and that is for us to define. And it is a precarious. It is a fine line that we have to tread, and it is something that we have tried to do in writing the basic law. But again, the issue, the principle of autonomy is central to the entire exercise, and so we should not let our best wishes and good intentions get the better of us and start to tread upon the autonomy that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region demands.
Mr. President, while His Honor was explaining, Senator Ralph Recto pointed out something to me, and I'd like to get clarification or confirmation from the sponsor. When I mentioned that loans and ODAs are part of the sources of revenues of Bangsamoro, there are limitations. And I looked at Section 143 on loans, and let me just read this. It says, it speaks of the right to contract loans, and then it says, provided that any loan secured from foreign lending institution shall require the prior concurrence of the Monetary Board. Provided further that any loan that will require sovereign guarantee, whether explicit or implicit, shall need the approval of the national government. The Bangsamoro Parliament may authorize the Chief Minister to contract such domestic or foreign loans. The loans so contracted may take effect upon approval by a majority of all the members of the Bangsamoro Parliament. So a couple of things come to mind. Senator Recto mentioned NEDA. I don't see anything here about NEDA. So when we speak of the concurrence of the Monetary Board, I'm not aware that they review the economic soundness of the proposal. That's one concern I have. The other would be, yes, if the loan will require sovereign guarantees, then the national government comes in. No? The approval is necessary as provided by Section 143. But what if there is no sovereign guarantee? What if it is simply the use of the existing funds allocated to Bangsamoro, or that they had raised themselves? Again, I go back to lessons learned. No, what are the check and balances? I don't have an answer, and I recognize that. I totally support the statement of His Honor that it's a thin line between recognizing that autonomy, giving the space. It's like raising a child. You want to give them as much freedom, but you want to be sure the check and balances.
And beyond that, it's a moving target, Mr. President. It's not a static point. And as the development carries on, it is a moving target, and more autonomy, less autonomy, and this is something that needs to be revisited quite often. So it's not a simple matter.
But then again, I'll use as an example the type of investigations or concerns that we have brought to the forefront simply by way of having a a Senate committee that investigates these things, that bring to light transactions that the national government went into that we should at least check, we should be concerned about. I just want to be sure that these kind of check and balances are there, because as His Honor pointed out, those interested in investing and of course making a bundle of money out of this area that is really ripe for development would be countries and institutions and private companies from all over the world. So it's just that my concern that it goes back to the benefit of the people, whether for lack of experience in negotiation, whether one may be blindsided or you just have one bad apple there among 9 great ones. That's the concern, Mr. President.
That is why, Mr. President, we have put it under the same system or the same method of assessment in terms of all loans that are being entered into by the national government, and for that matter, some local governments. But with the local government, in local government units, we have a very strict limit to the amount of loans that a local government unit can enter into, loan agreements that a local government can enter into. And the reason for that is we do not want them to get into such a situation or the proverbial hole that they cannot dig themselves out of because of, because of extraneous circumstances, because of poor management, whatever the reason. We do not want them to get into that situation. And that is why the Department of Finance looks very closely at all of these arrangements, all of these covenants that the local governments enter into. And in studying the matter, Mr. President, there is the language we left in, but it says further that any, in line 24 of page 67, provided further that any loan will require sovereign guarantee, whether explicit or implicit. When trying to study what are the loans that are explicit or implicit, all loans by any political entity in the republic actually have an implicit sovereign guarantee. So it really falls under sovereign guaranteed loans. All of them do. And why is that? The reason is very simple. The government of the Philippines, if a local government unit or if any other entity within the government falls into arrears and is unable to pay a loan, is unable to fulfill the terms of a loan covenant, then the national government still has to come in to remedy the situation. And the reason they do that is because this begins to affect our credit rating. This begins to affect the national national indebtedness. This begins to affect our foreign exchange levels. All of these, and that is why whatever, even if there are no explicit sovereign guarantees in any kind of loan arrangement, there is always an implicit guarantee, because this is something that the national government will not allow to happen, that a government entity or a local government unit will be allowed to fall into arrears, affecting the national situation, the national financial condition.
Excuse me, with the permission of Senator Cayetano, but realistically, a creditor will always require the process to be followed before a national guarantee, before a sovereign guarantee attaches. In other words, approval of the NEDA, Monetary Board, etc. If there are no such approval secured, you cannot compel the creditor anyway to approve the loan without a national guarantee, without a sovereign guarantee.
Yes, certainly. Those are the loans that require an explicit sovereign guarantee.
That's correct, yes.
What I am referring to, Mr. President, are those loans that do not have an explicit sovereign guarantee. And the situation as we have found it, upon studying it, is that they all have an implicit, even if they do not have an explicit sovereign guarantee, there is still an implicit sovereign guarantee, because our economic managers will not allow an entity, be it a GOCC, be it a local government, to fall into arrears, to fall afoul of their loan agreements, and thus affecting the financial situation of the entire country. That is the practice, and it is perfectly understandable that the national government will continuously monitor such loan agreements, because they would not want our own, the Republic's own financial situation to deteriorate because of the actions of an entity within government and under the auspices of the national government.
Thank you, Mr. President. I go now to section 138.
Yes.
Page 165. Page 65. On automatic appropriation. I'll just read the first sentence. The annual block grant shall be automatically appropriated to the Bangsamoro regional government and reflected in the GAA. Mr. President, since the time I became a senator, I was one of those who perennially questioned automatic appropriations. The history of this practice goes back during the time of the father of His Honor, where we went through a crisis period, or was it right after? Now I'm confused. It might have been during the term of the president's mother. In any case, it happened during a time of crisis, and it was never ended. We just continued that practice of automatic appropriation. I have no problem accepting it in the context of the time that it was enacted. But every year that I bring this up to the chairman of the Committee on Finance when we're in the debate on the national budget, it is what it is, and we've never amended that law. And so here I am seeing this phrase again. And so what happens when you have a phrase like this in what may become a law is that when the time comes, we're told, well, we already agreed that is automatically appropriated. You can stand there and say whatever you want, but it doesn't matter anymore. And so I am making my concern known now. I mean, this is basically what this is a main function of Congress. So to relinquish this at this point doesn't make sense to me and is contrary to our mandate under the Constitution. I may even have an open mind if there were, as His Honor agreed with me, some guidelines on how this fund would be spent. But there are none. And so even if His Honor were to come up with that, I still most likely would oppose automatic appropriation, because it's still my job to review this. And what will look great today, given Senator Marcos' experience in the local government, which is vast, which is much more than I can say for myself and many of my colleagues. I'm sure that experience comes in handy in crafting this, but it may not be the same circumstances 5 years from now. So I'd like to know His Honor's position on this. Are you open to amending that, deleting that provision, Mr. President?
Mr. President, we are open to all amendments that might be proposed, and certainly they will all be studied and noted and taken seriously and discussed in as much detail as any of the proponents would care to go. But to return to the question of the lady senator, again, we run into the principle of autonomy. And as we heard in the hearings, and from talking to the negotiating panel, to talking to the members of the MILF, one of the most important elements of that autonomy is so-called fiscal autonomy. And the characterization that was made in our discussions, in fact, if I remember, it was actually in private discussion, not in a public hearing, but was that how can you say that we are autonomous when we have to go begging to Congress every year for the monies that we need to operate the government. And that is why to provide the automatic appropriation will give that fiscal autonomy to the Bangsamoro government. And again, that is the argument that is made why it should be an automatic appropriation.
I understand, but the fact remains that it is a huge annual block grant that is not granted to any other region in the country, and therefore, it's a question of recognizing, choosing the right term. It's not begging. It's getting what will be due them if this is passed, and then presenting the appropriate justification for the use of those funds. I mean, it is still government funds, which is consistent, and based on that, check and balances are required. Having said that, I understand the concern, but I still feel that there must be certain degrees of accountability, and it cannot be a blanket, no explanation, no. I wasn't going to mention this, but I think I will put it on record, given the response that His Honor gave. In my experience during the budget process, I have defended and I have made amendments to the GAA on behalf of certain government agencies. For example, in the FDA, the Food and Drug Authority, I have defended their request and I support their request for retention of income. The same thing happened with protected areas. I have also defended their request for retention of income, and the same thing with our national cultural agencies. In all these cases, it has been denied because of lack of proper documentation, evidence, all the supporting papers that DBM requires to ensure that they deserve to get that. It's not even really added income, it's really income that they raised pursuant to their mandate, that they will use pursuant to their mandate, hindi po nabibigay. And very specific na yon. And we're talking of very small amounts. So if our agencies cannot even get those kind of fundings after what I know for a fact is years of submitting work plans, I really do not want to impose that on the Bangsamoro government. That's not my point. But my point is there's still got to be some submissions of some kind of work plan. I do not want to impose on you those horror stories of getting your fundings. Nope, I want the funding to go to you, to be utilized, to be accessed as soon as possible. But there's still got to be some kind of guidelines so that we know where it's going and there's a check and balance.
The lady senator is right in pointing out that the block grant is an entirely new feature in Philippine governance. We have never really provided a block grant, except in a different way, to try and get some definitions on record. A block grant, in fact, the use of the term block grant is mistaken. What we are providing is not a block grant. A block grant, by definition, is a grant that is given by national government to local government to implement a national program. For example, TB DOTS of the DOH, we provide funding to local governments to implement and to fund a national program. That is the example of a block grant. But never mind. This is the way that we have used it here. And so we will continue to use it in the way that it is proposed. So the block grant is not provided by any other local government unit. There is no such instance where, for whatever reason, again, the national government writes a check for a certain amount, hands it over to the local government, says, do with it as you please. But the reason that the automatic appropriation is also there, because of course, as I mentioned, because of fiscal autonomy being a central part of the autonomy that we are providing. The argument is made that it is akin to the ERA share of local governments. As when I was governor, there was an attempt, I believe, in the Senate at the time to hold back the payment of the ERA share of local governments. We, as ULAP, took the case to the Supreme Court. We won that case, and since then, the ERA share of local governments is an automatic appropriation. And that is why the argument, as I said, is made that this is a similar kind of a fund. And so that is why it should be automatic in its operation.
Understand, point well taken. Again, let me end on this point by saying, though, that it is a huge amount, which is why I feel like more check and balances are required. I can understand, I mean, as of now, and I have two local government experts to my left and to my right. I know the argument is it's not even enough, no? But this is a huge amount. It's bigger. So that's where my concern lies.
I think we will find, as we study the basic law, that we will run into this kind of situation wherein we are defining a mechanism, a grant, a fund that we never had before. We have never formed a regional government in the history of the Republic of the Philippines, and we are doing that now. So much of the time we are defining something new, and again it is up to us legislators to see in what is the nature of this block grant. Is it in fact like ERA or ERA share or not, or is it something over and above that? And that will affect its treatment and in the detail of how we dispense that fund, how we appropriate that fund, how it is budgeted. It is, as I said, something new, but again, it is something that we have tried in other parts of the basic law to make sure that the uses of that fund are very closely monitored by by entities in the national government, such as the DBM, such as the COA, that to make sure that at the very least the legal concerns have been addressed, and that the development concerns are also being addressed. So the provision of services, again, the development and the public investment. All that is being attended to and is actually part of the uses of those funds. But again, any clarification, any detail that the senator would like to introduce is something certainly that would be welcome. And if it makes the situation clearer, much of the things that we are doing in this basic law are political, and it is important to gain the support of the rest of the country, that it is clear that although we recognize that an accelerated development is necessary, we do not subscribe to the kind of wastage and excess that we have seen in the past.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move on to taxation. Section 130, letters A to D. Specifically, Section 130 states, taxing powers. The following taxes in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region shall be levied by the Bangsamoro Regional Government. A is capital gains tax. B is documentary stamp tax. C is donors tax. And D is estate tax. And then the provision further states that where all taxable elements are within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, taxes under letters A to D above shall no longer be imposed by the BIR of the national government. So what it says is that capital gains tax, documentary stamp tax, donors tax, and estate tax, if the Bangsamoro will now levy this within its region, then the national government cannot do the same anymore. In other words, what was previously levied by national government, which is being levied at present, will no longer go back to the national coffers. This will now be for the Bangsamoro regional government. That is correct, right?
That is correct, yes.
So, two things. Number one is, again, we are carving out a national practice for the Bangsamoro regional government. All over the country, taxes of this nature redound to the national government, supposedly for the benefit of the public. And now, for these four types of taxes that are levied from within the region, will no longer be shared by the other Filipinos in other in other parts of the country. My question is, more or less, how much is this? Do we have an idea? And then my second question is, when we speak of autonomy, the counterpart there is also that they continue to remain a part of the Philippines. And isn't taxation part of what binds you to your country? Sadly, sadly, we give tax to the countries that we pledge allegiance to.
Would that be debt and taxes, Mr. President?
Sadly, that's our bond, no? My bond from Taguig and Muntinlupa and Pateros is the same as yours, because wherever we're from, we contribute our income taxes, and this was my argument on the reproductive health bill, now a law, that regardless of where you are, we fund the national roads, we fund national bridges, we fund national schools. So parang, my concern is, in that sense, you know, we detach them. Is that a good thing? And then number two, what is that loss in terms of actual amount?
Well, in terms of principle, again, we are talking about defining the autonomy of the region. And when you talk about fiscal autonomy as a central principle to that autonomy that we are granting the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, then fiscal autonomy means autonomy in collection as well as in uses. And that is the recognition of that. And that is why we held it to a higher standard, or put it at a higher level than what is done at a local government unit. So although those, as identified, the first four new taxes that can be levied by the Bangsamoro regional government are new. These did not exist in the ARM law. This has only been put into the basic law. It is the first time that we have allowed a region to collect such taxes. And again, it is to balance the picture on the fiscal autonomy of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. In actual figures, the annual BIR collections, average annual BIR collections of capital gains, documentary stamp, donors, and estate taxes of 2001 to 2004, the average has been 18.5 million. And that is...
Sorry, for what?
I'm sorry, for this is for ARM. This is the collection that was done in ARM. From 2001 to 2004. Yeah, average ito. Yes, average. This is an average per year. Okay. Okay. So if we are to take 2001 to 2004, the average per year of collections in ARM, by BIR collections in ARM, of capital gains, doc stamp, donors, and estate taxes is 18.5 million. It represents 0.08% of the nationwide collections. It is a rather small number.
What is this, Mr. President? Donors tax and?
Capital gains, doc stamp, donors, and estate taxes.
All four, except income.
No,
sorry. All
just
four,
these
capital,
four.
doc stamps,
That's right.
donors, and estate, all four.
Capital gains, doc stamp, donors taxes, estate taxes.
That does seem like a small amount, Mr. President. I don't know if it is small because it is under-declared. Like, I really don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that we're very poor in collecting donors' taxes and estate taxes.
Well, the other very important point that needs to be made is many of these areas are conflict areas.
Yes.
Where tax collection is not exactly
The priority.
very efficient or rigorous.
I understand. I don't see that to be a problem now in terms of the amount, but I do see that as a potential problem. I mean, I can see how, the idea is to see these area having a booming urban centers, no? Maybe not next year, maybe not in 3 years, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's the dream. And we lose out on the capital gains, doc stamp. I mean, I'll ask my staff to pull out some figures from some other local government, maybe a few small cities, so we can compare. I'm not gonna. I mean, it doesn't seem like such a big deal given that kind of amount, so I'll leave that for now. But it is something that I'm taking note of that is coming out of national, which again other local governments have to pay, but now we're carving it out in the case of Bangsamoro. Section 131, Mr. President, still on taxation. I'll read it. National government taxes, fees, and charges collected in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, other than tariff and custom duty, shall be shared as follows: 25% to the national government and 75% to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. So my question is, Mr. President, what taxes are we referring to here? Income. Malamang income. VAT? Income? Local business taxes.
For the first 10 years, it's 100%. That is, Mr. President, that is actually already an amendment that we made. The original proposal in the draft BBL is that 100% of all of those taxes remain in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And again, the principle, the idea that I tried to remain to follow was, again, the amounts are not overly large. However, if we are trying to incorporate and bring into the fold of the state the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, then they must contribute as well to the national government. So that is why from 100% it became 75-25. And the original proposal was that 100% would remain within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for the first 10 years of its existence. And we have removed that, and we have changed the sharing to 75-25. Again, it is more to it is more to demonstrate that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is an inherent part of the state and therefore contributes its fair share to the coffers of the state.
Is this in addition to the block grants?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. President. It is in addition to the block grant.
And how much would this be?
It works. It comes out to approximately about 36 million, Mr. President.
36 million?
Not billion.
Billion?
No, million.
Mr. President, I'll put on record that Senator Ralph Recto is saying more.
In fact, in the ARM law, the sharing was 70-30. But again, following the principle that we do not lessen what is granted by the armed law to Muslim Mindanao, and rather increase it, be made it. That is why it became 75-25. But again, there was an original proposal in the draft BBL where 100% would remain in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for the first 10 years. Again, the reason that we removed the 10-year grace period, if you would like to call it that, is because it is a question of understanding again that we are trying to bring in the Bangsamoro. We're not trying to separate them. We are not trying to make them different. We are not trying to put them in another situation than the rest of the country, and that is why we feel that I felt that we must show, at least to the rest of the country, that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region is making contributions to the national coffers to the advantage of the rest of the country.
Mr. Sponsor, looking at this provision, it would appear that the intention is that where a corporation is doing business in the autonomous region, that corporation is supposed to pay the corresponding taxes and fees in the city, province, where the corporation or partnership is doing business. What if the corporation or partnership would have the main office in Makati, and is doing business in the autonomous region? What happens?
Then this no longer applies. This applies to corporations that are doing all their business. They are based in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. All their operations are within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. If in that case they have their headquarters in Makati, then the same situation applies to all other corporations, and they pay their taxes in Makati.
Well, maybe we can clarify that in the amendments, because that is not clear from the way it is worded. The way it is worded, if they are engaged in business in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, they shall pay their income taxes in the province or city where the corporation is doing business.
Certainly, Mr. President, we could use some clarification on that, the paragraph from line 7 to 9. But that is the intent. That was the intent, is that, of course, the tax code applies when the corporation has operations outside of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, and the same situation applies to any other corporation that has headquarters outside of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region.
Mr. Sponsor, you said that this amounts only to 36 million pesos?
That when was 36 million collected? That last year? Saan natin nakuha? This is from Alpha. It is a projection, and it's not an actual collection yet. What year? It is an actual collection. It's not an estimate, Mr. President. I'm just making sure that we have the right year for that amount.
May manufacture. Ralph, you want? Mr. President, is this honor?
No, I'm just
Just
to verify on that 36 million, because I suspect this is much, much higher.
Senator Ralph is saying 3 billion.
In ARM?
Yeah.
On the corporate taxes, because most of the operations that are in ARM actually have headquarters outside of ARM. That is why the collection has not been made within the ARM. That's why, although those corporations might be remitting taxes in that amount, they are not remitting it in the ARM.
Because under that computation, Senator Marcos, if you're saying that this amounts roughly to 36 million. We're saying that the total collection in ARM is just about 45 million. Because 75% of that would
It is,
roughly be...
yes. Actually, it was a little bit surprising for me
Yeah.
to find out that the numbers in ARM are quite.
Maybe we can take a good look at this because...
Let me. I will get the specific figures, Mr. President. And
Thank you very much. Yes.
I will provide everyone with those statistics.
Mr. President, my next topics are on another matter, but I can continue another time, so we can, unless it's...
I beg your pardon. Sorry.
Would you like to want to continue?
No. We found some figures, but they're aggregated. They're not corporate. Collections alone. The total collections on taxes. The total collection on taxes in ARM was last year was 1,302,000,000. The projected for 2015 is 1,471,644,000.
Mr. President, I am moving on to another topic, so I would prefer to continue on a different date. I can continue on Wednesday if there's no one else in line. Unfortunately, every Tuesday I am in the Supreme Court for the Knights of Rizal versus Torre de Manila hearing. So, with the indulgence of the sponsor, I'll continue on to the next subject matters
Yes, please.
next time.
Yes, certainly, Mr. President.
Thank you. So the
Mr. President, I think,
interpellation of Senator Pia Cayetano is suspended.
actually, Mr. President,
I'm sorry.
I believe Senator Ralph wants to make a follow-up question now. Mr.
Well, we'll
President.
recognize Senator Ralph after.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr.
So
President.
this is for the record. Senator Cayetano will continue her interpellation on Wednesday. All right. We now recognize Senator Ralph Recto.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to follow up on the points raised by Senator Pia, I didn't want not to use the opportunity since she brought these issues out already. With the permission of the gentleman from Ilocos.
Certainly, Mr. President.
On the issue of the taxes being collected, this 1.5 or whether the number is 36 million to 3.5 billion or 1.5 billion, who collects those taxes today?
That's still collected by the BIR. The internal
By the
revenue
BIR.
internal is still collected. The
So
BIR still continues with that function in the ARM.
How much has the Bangsamoro collected in ARM, the regional government? Have they collected anything?
I do not believe that they have. The ARM government has that function. They do not do any of the collection. It is actually the gentleman from Batangas is reminding me of the hearing that we had together, wherein there was a question by the BIR commissioner when she was asking how their functions would be carried out in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And the proposal is basically that the BIR still does the collection in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, and making those collections, handing over all of those collections to the Bangsamoro government. That was the original proposal. And so we conceive that it will have to be the same situation where the BIR will still continue to collect those taxes, and then the whatever formula for sharing we decide upon, that is how they will apportion those collections.
Yeah, yes, Mr. President. I look at this from a public administration point of view. You have the barangay with a barangay treasurer. The municipality has a municipal treasurer and assessor. The provincial government has an assessor and a treasurer. The municipality and the cities collect business taxes, real property taxes, and other fees and charges. The same is true for the provincial government, but it collects more real property tax. It does not collect business taxes. No? So what will the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao collect? Because if you read the ARM law and you read the BBL, we're talking about giving them autonomy. We're talking about giving them powers to levy taxes. So, will the taxes be on top of what the national government is collecting or on top of what the local government is collecting? If that is the case, then you will be outpricing, magiging mahal, uncompetitive yung Bangsamoro. Unless, for example, in this provision, yung 75-25% sharing scheme, I would assume these are other internal revenue taxes. Meaning to say, income tax, individual, corporate income taxes, value-added taxes within the region that the national government is willing to give more to the regional government. Anyway, the local governments don't collect that. So are we willing to share in effect? That is the proposal here. Now, kung hindi rin sila kokolekta at national government din ang kokolekta, ano pang role na ang gagawin ng Bangsamoro Autonomous Region? Look at the situation, Mr. President. You have an annual block grant. Galing from all over the country, ibibigay sa kanila no strings attached. Okay? Here we're saying, okay, we will give you now 75-25. Today, the era is 40% for all local government units 3 years ago. In the budget today, that's roughly about 20%. Okay, dito sinasabi natin 75-25. So maybe 3.5 times more in your area. But then the national government will collect it and then remit it to you. Why not, since this is a new revenue, a new tax that used to be collected by the national, why not let the Bangsamoro collect that? Sila na mag-collecta niyan. And then whatever they collect, no strings attached. That's fine. That's local autonomy. What you raise, you spend on your own. But if I give you a block grant, and you're asking a block grant from the national government, and all taxpayers from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao will provide, why should it be automatically appropriated? I don't mind increasing the block grant for as long as you put probably strings attached. Let's say to the Millennium Development Goals, to poverty incidence in ARM, to education shortfall, kulang na kulang health facilities dun, patubig, so on and so forth. But insofar as new taxes are concerned, whatever they collect, yun ang full autonomy dapat. Then they determine how to spend that money. So would the gentleman from Ilocos be willing to accept some of these amendments based on this principle?
Certainly. As a matter of fact, the reason that we have the BIR still doing the collection is because the assumption is that upon the establishment of the Bangsamoro government, they will still not be completely able to collect those taxes. However, if you look at the Section 132 of the Basic Law, there will be formed a Bangsamoro Autonomous Regional Tax Office within the BAR for the purpose of assessing and collecting Bangsamoro Autonomous Region taxes until such time that the Bangsamoro region tax, the BARTO, it's called, is established. The collection of Bangsamoro Autonomous Region tax will be done by the BIR. So that implies that once they feel that they are capable to do the assessment and the collection, then that function will shift to the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region Tax Office.
So two things, Mr. President, on that response, and I've read that in the BBL. One is, we've had the ARM since 1998. You mean to tell me they've never organized a tax office or a treasury department to collect until today?
Tax office. Tax office.
Huh? Second, we must define clearly also the relationship of this regional government.
The function of assessment and collection in ARM has always been undertaken by the BIR. There was for whatever reason in the organization of ARM, they felt that there was no necessity.
That's precisely my point, Mr. President. The reason why ARM was a failure is because it was never looked as a on a public administration perspective. Let me give you another example, Mr. President. If you read the ARM law and the BBL, we say that all these taxing powers we're giving to the region. But they are the same taxing powers we are giving local government units. Halimbawa, business taxes. Like I said, yung munisipyo ang kokolekta in the city, maximum 2% lang ang pwede i-kolekta of gross revenue under the local government code. When you say that we are giving the power to the region to collect those taxes, would it be on top of the 2% of the local government units?
That is up to the, we have to recognize, again, as you very well pointed out in our hearing, that this is another level. This
So
is another
magiging mas
layer.
mahal. If they do that,
That is why it will, again, it will have to be upon the discretion and determination of the Bangsamoro government on what their investment policy is going to be. Are they going to encourage investment by keeping these fees and taxes down? Or are they more interested in just collecting and collecting? So again, that kind of determination is part of the autonomy that we are granting them, and that is how I saw it, and I feel it's somewhat similar to the local government unit.
Question
Pwede
one.
mong taasan ng husto yung ano, but you're
No, there's a limitation.
But you are not so
Competitive.
competitive, and you are not so attractive for investment. But again, it's the determination of the local government.
Will the regional government, can they, for example, come out with a law, local law, saying that, okay, 50% of what Cotabato City's collection, akin yan. Whatever they're collecting, can they say half of whatever the provinces are collecting, half of what all the cities and municipalities are collecting, business taxes, that is mine?
No, Mr. President, they cannot. We made it very, very clear in all aspects of the basic law that none of the powers, functions, privileges provided to local governments by 7160 can be diminished in any way. And so, no, they cannot take from the collections of local governments. Okay. I would also like to
so it can only add on, it cannot reduce.
No, it cannot reduce because those taxing powers that are granted by RA 7160 to local governments remain.
So the only remaining taxes then will be income taxes, VAT, that is collected by the national government.
That's right, Mr. President.
Right? Okay. So that is where the 75-25% is coming in.
The income taxes that they collected are that they will collect that will go to the Bangsamoro government are the income taxes levied on banks. It was specifically on banks, Mr. President.
On banks.
On banks.
My understanding is that that is reserved now to the national government.
Well, yes, it is. But in the proposed law, that is being given. This is because of the establishment of the Islamic banking system, and so we had to make changes to accommodate that new feature, which does not exist anywhere else in the Philippines.
Okay. So at this point, Mr.
just
President,
before. Okay, you mentioned banks, Mr. Sponsor. Let's say the bank is located, head office here in Makati. He operates branches all over the autonomous region. Where will the income taxes be paid?
The income taxes of those banks will be paid where they were always previously paid, Mr. President.
Which is Makati, let's say.
Which is, let's say, Makati.
Let's say
Which is
Makati.
probably Makati, yes. This particular provision was introduced to apply specifically to the Islamic banking system. It is the adjustment that we made for to allow the Islamic banking system to operate under the auspices of the Bangsamoro government. Not the control and supervision, but under the auspices of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. It is actually a provision that exists already in RA 9054, in the armed law.
Well, subject to further study, let's let that answer stay, and then we can debate it later on. Yes, Senator.
One final point, Mr. President, and to answer the question. I do have the figures here. In 2013, the national revenues collected in ARM was 2.3 billion, of which ARM's share is 1.6 billion.
Sorry,
The total collections in 2013 was 2.3 billion.
2.3 billion.
Yes, and then the share that was given to ARM, remitted to ARM by the BIR, is 1.6.
That was under the 70-30 sharing
Yes.
sharing.
I think
scheme.
local autonomy should be the other way around. The government, the local government, or in this case, the ARM region, should collect this 2.3 and keep the 75% and remit the balance to the national government. That is what local autonomy means. In fact, how I wish that all local government units were that way. Maybe not 75-25, but if the ERA is 40%, I collect first, I keep my 40, then I remit the 60. Because as a public administration point of view as well, Mr. President, look at the situation. You have two collecting agencies. You have the national government, you have the BIR, but then you have all the local treasurers down the line, from barangay, municipio, probinsya. Why would the taxpayers now have two sets of books? One for the BIR, one for the local government unit, sometimes more. One for the board of directors, one for the creditors, and one for his wife. So there are 5 sets of books. Whereas if you only had one institution collecting the taxes,
I'm sure the governor will be very interested to hear that there's a set of books just for her.
no, it's the other way around. She keeps it from me, Mr. President. But those are the points that I'd like to raise at the appropriate time.
Yes,
I don't mind increasing the block grants. I don't mind even doubling the assistance to ARM, considering that they need to do a catch-up. But I do not think it should be automatically appropriated. And I think there should be strings attached to education, to healthcare, to agriculture, to competitiveness, so on and so forth. But then, whatever they collect by themselves, full autonomy, they should spend it the way they want to spend it.
I fully agree, Mr. President. Again, it is an interim arrangement in terms of the function of collection and assessment until the tax office of the region has been created and is up and running.
Yeah, but the BARTO is only for collection of taxes established or
taxes imposed by the Bangsamoro government.
Yes,
by the
imposed
parliament.
by the Bangsamoro government.
Yes,
not by the national government.
not by the national government.
One final, Mr. President.
Yes.
Can the autonomous region, the Bangsamoro regional government, deputize?
Can they?
Can they deputize the local treasurers to collect for them
Local treasurers from the local governments?
from the local government?
I would think
It would
not.
make it more efficient.
I would think not, simply because that is not that is not a function that is laid out in the local government code for local treasurers to undertake.
The principle, Senator Recto, is that you cannot delegate a delegated authority.
I would assume that local autonomy or a regional government here that we're trying to create, and if it has autonomy over that area, and for it to be cheaper, instead of them having their own another BIR in that area, may national government BIR ka doon, may regional government BIR ka doon, may local government parang BIR ka doon.
Parang treasury.
So why can't they just deputize the local governments to collect for them?
Yeah. We can review that.
Well, it's something that certainly can be discussed.
Thank you, Senator Recto. Yes, the majority leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2894 under Committee Report number 200.
Any objection? Hearing none, suspended.
Mr. President,
The chair would like to inquire, is there anyone who has expressed interest in putting this bill on the floor for further interpolation tomorrow?
I will interpolate tomorrow, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, some administrative matters. I would like to manifest that Senator Santiago has agreed for Senator Soto to be a co-author to Senate Bill number 2137 entitled An Act Providing a Framework for the Right to Adequate Food, Mr. President.
So, reflect that on the record.
Mr. President, I move to designate Senators Villar, Angara, Pimentel, Ejercito, and myself as members of the Senate panel in the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2752, entitled An Act Strengthening Non-Government Organizations Engaged in Microfinance Activities for the Poor, and House Bill number 5217, entitled An Act Governing the Accreditation of Micro-Enterprise Development Institutions, Mr. President.
So constituted.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2890 under Committee Report number 199. This is the bill on expanding the benefits and privileges of persons with disability, Mr. President.
All right. In order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this measure is that we closed the period of committee amendments last August 19, 2015, and thus I move, Mr. President, that we open the period of individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Angara,
Senator Angara is recognized.
and I move that we recognize Senator Soto for his proposed individual amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Soto is recognized.
Mas una ka. Mauna ka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished gentleman accept only one amendment if he so desires?
Certainly, Mr. President, from the distinguished gentleman from QCN Cebu.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, on page 5, line 8, after the word upon, I move to delete the phrase and living with. This is to make this bill applicable to cases wherein the taxpayers are not living with their dependent disabled persons like OFWs or working in a different location, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the impact of the amendment would be to make it more inclusive in the sense of
Yes.
coverage in terms of the persons with disabilities covered, and the inclination of this representation is to accept the amendment, Mr. President.
We note that this will apply to PWDs who are not gainfully employed. So if they are not gainfully employed, they must be living with the taxpayer. If they're not gainfully employed, where would the residents be? I mean, I'm just asking a practical question because that's how it is worded, Senator Soto.
Basically, Mr. President, we're looking at those who are relying on their relatives who are working abroad. They will not be living together. You know, when the OFW is abroad or in the province. This was originally not contained in the original the law, the present law, and that is why we just want to make sure that it continues that way, because this was an additional phrase in this amendment that we are proposing for the old law, Republic Act 7277, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
Well, I'm inclined to accept it, Mr. President, because it's a well-intentioned amendment with a view to including more PWDs within the ambit of who may be claimed as a dependent by a taxpayer. And I note the Senate President's comments regarding there would probably be very few instances. It would not add, as a practical matter, it would probably not add that many But the philosophy is there in terms of the amendment of Senator Soto to make it more inclusive for PWDs. And in fact, when he proposed it last week, we had representatives from the NCDA, or the National Council for Disability Affairs, and they were actually telling me, ba't hindi mo in-accept? Sabi ko, hindi pa kasi period of amendments. I-accept ko yon, sabi ko. So clearly, they are in favor of the Soto amendment, Mr. President.
All right. So the sponsors accepting amendment. Any objection? You are approved.
That is all, Mr. President. I wish to thank the
The
distinguished
chair has
sponsor.
a question, Senator Angara.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Soto.
On the same page, on line 7, there is a word chiefly dependent upon. What exactly do you understand? How do we define chiefly for purposes of spreading this into the record, so that when this is implemented, we know what exactly this word means?
I suppose, Mr. President, there is a need to clarify the import of the words chiefly dependent. It's its main source of income. It comes from the taxpayer, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, chiefly dependent upon the taxpayer? Those who are not gainfully employed and chiefly dependent upon the taxpayer, what does chiefly mean?
The word chiefly was already contained in the old law, Mr. President, with respect to the dependents, the children. So we adopted the same language, but we understand it is meant that the main source of income, the biggest source of income, is comes from the taxpayer.
All right. Just wanted to spread it in the record.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just I would like to propose one last individual amendment in accordance with the Senate President's comments last week, Mr. President, if I may be allowed.
Please proceed.
Yeah. On the same page 5, on lines 13 and 14, to delete the phrase "in consultation with the concerned Senate and House committees and other agencies, organizations, and establishments." And if I may read the new section, Mr. President, it would read, Section 3, Implementing Rules and Regulations, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD in parentheses, in consultation with the Department of Health, DOH, Department of Finance, DOF, and the National Council on Disability Affairs, NCDA, shall promulgate the necessary rules and regulations for the effective implementation of the provisions of this Act, provided that the failure of the concerned agencies to promulgate the said rules and regulations shall not prevent the implementation of this Act upon its effectivity. I so move, Mr. President.
Objection?
No other individual amendments, Mr. President.
Mr. President, no other senators wish to propose individual amendments, so I thus move that we close the period of individual amendments.
So closed.
Mr. President, I move that we approve Senate Bill number 2890 under Committee Report number 199 on second reading.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2890 under Committee Report number 199.
So suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader. Thank you.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, August 25, 2015.
Session is adjourned until 3 p.m. of Tuesday, August 25, 2015.